Well, as again, thousands of people would be able to relate to, when she applied for EI benefits, she was denied because the EI commission, who decides these things, said, well, you lost your job because of your own misconduct. And that misconduct, of course, is, declining to undergo an experimental medical procedure called COVID vaccination.
Tamara Ugolini here with Rebel News to bring you the story of a healthcare worker who was arbitrarily denied her employment insurance, that's EI, benefits due to alleged non-compliance with a COVID-19 vaccine mandate. Rebecca Abdu was a medical laboratory technologist with the Canadian Blood Services who did not have direct contact with patients and conducted her laboratory analysis work alone in her office. After trying to jump through all of her employer's hoops while trying to obtain a religious exemption to their indiscriminate injection mandate, Abdu had her claim denied. And then subsequently, her record of employment denoted that she engaged in misconduct, which meant that her EI benefits were also denied. When the COVID-19 vaccine mandates came about in the fall of 2021, less than a year after they had been authorized under emergency use legislation by Health Canada, the federal government released clarification around records of employment and the codes used for employees in light of all things COVID-19 pandemonium. Here is what their website reads under COVID-19 vaccination. When the employee doesn't report to work because they refuse to comply with your mandatory COVID-19 vaccination policy, use code EQUIT or code N, leave of absence. When you suspend or terminate an employee for not complying with your mandatory COVID-19 vaccination policy, use code M, dismissal or suspension. If you use these codes, we may contact you to determine the following. If you had adopted and clearly communicated to all employees a mandatory COVID-19 vaccination policy, if the employees were informed that failure to comply with the policy would result in loss of employment, if the application of the policy to the employee was reasonable within the workplace context, and if there were any exemptions for refusing to comply with the policy. Yet many sought religious exemptions and were arbitrarily denied and then further denied the EI benefits that they have paid into for their entire working lives based on a personal medical choice that ran contrary to the COVID regime's medical industrial complex. I've featured many of these stories, like nurse Catherine, and then another healthcare worker who had no direct patient contact and a pre-existing vaccine exemption signed by hospital administrators. That was Robin Bigger. And joining me now to discuss the case of Abdu and how it could affect all of these other cases is Abdu's lawyer, James Kitchen from Liberty Coalition Canada, who is providing her with free legal defense. Check it out.
So Rebecca's case is similar to thousands across the country. She was faced with a mandatory COVID vaccination employment policy. Policy specifically said, look, we'll grant human rights accommodations. As a lot of people know, that was just lip service. A lot of these policies said they would follow the human rights legislation, and they didn't. And so she put in a request for human rights accommodation under the basis of religious beliefs. She met her burden under the case law, under the Absalom case from the Supreme Court of Canada in 2004, to show she had a belief. The employer predictably came back and said those beliefs were personal. Never mind that the Supreme Court of Canada spent about 10 paragraphs in that seminal case saying that religious beliefs are personal beliefs. So that's blatantly unlawful to begin with. But again, people can relate all across the country. The law was disregarded, that's what people did. And so she was denied her religious accommodation. And then the employer said, well, because you didn't take the shot, we're going to fire you now. And so they fired her. And of course, she's unionized. So, it's a tough haul for her to try to get her rights enforced because the unions are pro-vax and they're pretty much in bed with the employers when it comes to ideological issues like COVID vaccination. But she applied for EI benefits, which anybody in the country can do and should be able to do if they lose their job due to no fault of their own. It's the whole idea behind the legislation. Well, as again, thousands of people would be able to relate to, when she applied for EI benefits, she was denied because the EI commission, who decides these things, said, well, you lost your job because of your own misconduct. And that misconduct, of course, is, declining to undergo an experimental medical procedure called COVID vaccination. And So then she hired me at this point, and we went to what's called the Social Security Tribunal of Canada. That's who you appeal to. If the EI Commission says, no, we're not going to give you your benefits, you can appeal to that tribunal, and they can decide whether or not the EI Commission acted lawfully in denying that. Well, again, predictably, the Social Security Tribunal, the general division, so that's the first level you go to, said, no, the EI Commission is right. It is misconduct to not take the COVID vaccination, and therefore you lost your job because of your own fault. Now, just to clarify, misconduct is for things like showing up to work drunk, repeatedly not showing up to work at all, selling cigarettes at work illegally, stealing money from the cash register, getting high at work. These types of things that we probably all have either familiar with personally or through friends that have lost their jobs when they were young. These are actual things you shouldn't do at work. You will actually get fired for them. The idea with misconduct is to mirror getting fired, right? If the reason you lost your job was for something that you could have gotten fired for lawfully, like not showing up to work or showing up to work drunk, then you committed misconduct, which means you shouldn't get your EI benefits, right? The whole idea with this is so that people who get fired for doing bad things at work don't get EI, and only the people who lose their jobs through no fault of their own get EI. It's to preserve the EI benefits for those who actually deserve them, right? That's the theory, right? So then you have to ask yourself, well, isn't that pretty disgusting that the unvaccinated are now unworthy to get EI benefits as if they were the types of people that show up to work drunk? And it's just another way that the unvaccinated people were treated like second-class citizens, were treated like dirt. Is they're not even able to get the EI benefits that they paid into. So we lost at the general division, predictably, and then you have to appeal to the appeal division of the Social Security Tribunal. They wouldn't even hear the appeal. They denied leave to appeal. They said, we don't even want to waste our time on this. So then the next level that we have to go to is the Federal Court of Canada. And at this point, my client said, look, she's not independently wealthy. Most people aren't. She said, I just don't have any more money. And I said, well, look, let's see if Liberty Coalition Canada can step in and help you out and hopefully help out thousands of other Canadians, Christians and otherwise, who were unlawfully denied their EI benefits. And so Liberty Coalition Canada has stepped up and is paying the legal fees on this for me to be able to take this to the Federal Court of Canada.
Right. And I want to talk to you about how that precedence will affect those other cases like you just referred to. But first, I want to go back to this misconduct and being found to be sort of non in compliance with a COVID-19 vaccine mandate policy, work-related. And perhaps you can touch on it because a statement of claim definitely highlights this injustice, what I would call injustice, is that this was never a stipulation of employment at the time of employment. So in Rebecca's case, for instance, I saw that she had been employed for 10 years, and 10 years ago, this wasn't part of her employment. Can you touch on the legalities around that?
Right. So, in law, an employer can't just tell you to do anything and then fire you if you don't. Right. So the employer can't tell you to do a handstand every day for 10 minutes before you start work. You can make that a mandatory policy. Or, you have to wear purple rimmed glasses on Purple Rimmed Glasses Day. You have to do these things. And if you don't, you're insubordinate and you're fired. If the employer does that, it's wrongful dismissal. And of course, if they're unionized, hopefully the union would do something about it. But just it's wrongful dismissal. And, you would have to pay your employee money, and you couldn't get away with claiming that you fired them for cause, for actually doing something wrong. Okay. And, if the EI Commission comes in and says, well, if they blithely come in and say, disingenuously come in and say, oh, well, you didn't follow your employer's mandate, their policies, therefore you committed misconduct. That's basically just being willfully ignorant or intentionally stupid. And that's essentially what the general division here said, right? Instead of actually being intelligent and thinking and applying the analysis properly to determine if there was actually misconduct, the analysis was literally as simple as the employer said you do A and you didn't do A, therefore you don't get your EI benefits. And that's the problem, right? The law is, or at least should be, such that you have to actually do something wrong in the normal English sense of the word in order to not get your EI benefits. The interesting thing is that in the past, there's never been a situation in this country where thousands of people have been fired allegedly for cause, for something that isn't actually something they did wrong, right? Because normally you couldn't do that because the law would catch up with these people, and the people are actually somewhat fearful of actually being accountable to the law. So that's a whole other issue. The fact that thousands of people just said, I don't care about the law, and I don't actually think it's going to hold me accountable, so I'll just do this thing. So this situation is new. The Social Security Tribunal and the EI Commission has never dealt with this, never dealt with a situation where people were getting fired from their jobs for something they didn't actually do wrong, and then they have to actually think and apply an independent analysis and say, well, they should still get their EI benefits because they didn't actually do anything wrong. Instead, they just said, oh, you didn't obey your employer, so you don't get your EI benefits, right? But it's like I said, that's a stupid analysis, because that means your employer can ask you to do anything stupid, and then you don't get EI benefits. And that's what's been happening to thousands of people across the country. And that's why it's gotta be fixed. That's a big part of what this is about.
And so the goal, obviously, with this appeal now is to fix it for those thousands of Canadians all across the country who have been arbitrarily and unjustly denied their benefits. What is the time frame on something like this, and how does that look for those other Canadians who may be able to go back to the EI tribunal and resubmit their claims?
So in my experience, the federal court is a little more efficient than other courts, not as bogged down. They tend to actually hear and decide cases in a decent time frame. So I would be hopeful that I can get this case heard here in the next few months and get a decision before the end of the year, before the end of 2023. Ideally, I can't confirm this, but what I'm hoping, first of all, I got to win. I hope I win. I think I actually have a decent chance of winning. So ideally, what will happen is if I get this decision before the end of the year, obviously disseminate it as much as I can to the rest of the country, and then people who applied for EI benefits and were denied can go back to the EI Commission or the Social Security Tribunal or whatever level they were at and say, look, the law has changed. There's been a new development. I want my case to be reconsidered and redecided in accordance with the law, and I want my benefits. Now, I don't want to give anybody false hope. I don't know how that's exactly going to shake out. But my hope is that the EI Commission is going to respond by saying, okay, we'll follow the law now. Here's your benefits. And I look forward, if they don't, I look forward to having another case where I hold them accountable and we can get justice for the thousands of Canadians that were denied benefits. And the EI Commission can start giving benefits to all those people that at least applied. For the people who didn't apply, I don't think there's going to be anything they can do because I think they're just barred by the lack of, there's too much time, they didn't apply. But if you at least applied and were denied, you should be able to take this decision back and get your benefits, because it will hopefully have been within the time frame that you can go back and get it reconsidered. That's my hope, ultimately, for people, practically speaking. I can't guarantee that, but that's what I hope to see happen.
And if it doesn't, there are a few more checks and balances in place where this can be further appealed. But I assume that's going to be a much more lengthy and costly process.
Yeah, well, that's part of the problem, you see, because EI is designed to help people when they're in financial hardship, and so when your benefits get denied, right? What are you supposed to do? I mean, you're in the exact wrong spot to be hiring a lawyer to try to get these people to follow the law, right? And that's why there's so few of these cases. I mean, I'm only aware of one other case that's made it to the federal courts, and I hope they win too. Because who's got the money to pay for all this, right? So this is part of the injustice of all this is you got all these people that lost their jobs and were denied benefits and were denied access to healthcare and were denied all this and that. And, they're super vulnerable, right? I mean, not psychologically, of course, because of the way they've been treated, but financially because they've lost all these things. So, they're not able to hold all these people accountable for their abuses of power. And it's really sad to see. So that's part of what I'm trying to help out with. Part of the reason why I think it's so great that organizations like Liberty Coalition Canada, Democracy Fund, the Justice Center, that's why these organizations are so important. It's so important to donate and to fund these organizations, because without these organizations, the regular little people that get pounded into the ground by these powerful elites who do whatever they want with no regard to the law, they can't be held accountable, right? Because you can't come up with the money to hire the lawyers to hold them accountable. Right. So I encourage people to consider donating to Liberty Coalition Canada specifically, especially for this case, but just in general, to donate to these organizations because we need them. I can't just always work for free. Right. That's unfortunately the reality. And so this is how you hold people accountable, is when you crowdfund and you bring these cases and you hold these organizations and these government entities accountable.
Only time will tell if the law upholds the freedom of medical choice to not be coerced by first denying economic freedom, but then also denying access to a publicly funded social safety net program due to contrarian personal medical choices. For Rebel News, I'm Tamara Ugolini. Have you seen the fun new designs that we have in store at rebelnewsstore.com? If not, then you can head over there to check them all out because there is always something new to fit your free-thinking, freedom-loving mind. It's a fun way that you can also support our independent journalism, and while you're there, you can use code TAMARA, that's TAMARA 10, to save 10% off of your total purchase. Head on over to rebelnewsstore.com, check out our fun new swag, and use code TAMARA10 at checkout. Thanks for your support.